Welcome everyone to the Camera Brains Filmmaker Q&A series. My name is Chase and I'm the creator of the @camera.brains Instagram community where we show you the cameras behind your favorite films, commercials, and music videos. I'm pumped to have Anthony Kimata on as our first guest. And it's actually pretty fitting that you're on as our first guest because our very first post on Instagram featured your work. So yeah, I think it was your music video, the Diosa remix. Yeah. That was a cool video with the lighting. Yeah. So we'll talk about that too today. But I was reading a bit about you and I'm really intrigued by your story. I'd love to learn more. I saw, from Kenya to Britain to California to being a registered nurse to being a full-time cinematographer. Like you've had quite the journey and I'd love to kind of get into it. I'd really love to hear your origin story and how you got into the industry. I mean, it's wild.
Oh man, super cool. Dang, you did your research. That's amazing. Yeah, so I was born in Kenya. Grew up pretty much 14 years of my life there. It was a pretty amazing place actually. And my mom moved to London, I think when I was maybe 12 or something along those lines. And I was staying with my dad for a while. And then around the age of 14, my mom and dad decided for me to go over with her. I guess she missed me a lot. So I went over to London and I lived in London since from 14 to about 16. It was really amazing. The people are great. Schools were great. Had a lot of fun. And then when I turned about 16, we encountered a little bit of hardship. So my mom sent me over to my aunt who was here in California. And actually not too far is in Santa Clarita in Stevenson Ranch.
Oh,
so
wow.
I moved there, and from there I was like, went to high school and started college. And when I was in college, actually, so most of culturally, like there's in our community, when people like move to diaspora, there's a few careers that are like accepted, right? So you have like you either like a doctor, a lawyer, a mechanic, a nurse, or an engineer. So and then like if you're not doing any of those, you're not really like you're not working or something, right?
Yeah, you're not making it. Yeah.
You're not making it. Your parents like, what are you doing? Like that's not a job. You can't live that way. So when I was in Kenya, I did a couple plays where I was actually a performer, and I liked it, but it was okay. And then when I went to England, I started doing stage stuff where I was like, behind the scenes making like things move, and you're hiding and stuff, and you're like, and it became very intriguing to me where you're on this open stage and everyone can see the open stage, and like so we're all decked out in black, and like we'll move set pieces on, and like certain lights will turn on and certain lights will turn off, so like you start pulling audiences focus to certain places. And I was like, oh dude, this is awesome, and I enjoyed that a lot. And then when I moved to here in the US, I continued the same thing. I went to a school in Santa Clarita called Hart, and they had a theater program, and I did that there as well. It was a lot of fun. Then getting into college, like your parents are like, yo, dude, like, you got to pick something serious, right? So, my aunts and uncles and parents were like, all right, try nursing, see how you did. So I started off as a CNA and worked and went to college at the same time, used that to pay for, actually at that time I was living by myself. So I was paying for my college by that. Then I became a monitor technician, and then went to nursing school, did that, came out or worked at an ICU over in Tarzana. And I was doing that from like 2006 until maybe 2012 or 2011. And around 2010, I met my cousin introduced me to actually a very long time friend now. His name is Mike, who's a director.
Yeah, I see you do a lot of work with him.
Yeah, we work quite a bit together. So around 2000, so while I was in nursing school and also in nursing, my aunt, I was chilling on the beach, and like some guy was taking photos. I liked the camera, and a buddy of mine who I work with, his name is Jet, at the hospital. he also had a DSLR, and I was like, oh man, how you like it? He's like, it's super cool. And I got kind of intrigued, and so I ended up getting one for myself, um, and started taking pictures. And people are like, yo, dude, those photos are dope. And I'm like, oh man, thanks. And then people are like, hey, I'll pay you to take photos and this, that, and the other. And I started getting paid to do that. And then somewhere along that mix, my cousin introduced me to Mike, and I saw some of his work online. I was like, oh, dude, I like this guy's work. So we met, and we met it was a photo shoot for a magazine. I think it was like VIP Club Scene, I think was the name of the magazine or something like that. So we met on the shoot, and we clicked off immediately, and like we just vibed. And I still kept on taking photos, and I would assist him a lot in his, like I'd do his, I'd set up his lights for him and this, that, and the other. We were both coming up together. And so maybe 2 years into that mix, I'm still nursing, still going to school also, still nursing, and furthering my career that way also, and working on like a little side hustle of photography, and the also the 5D Mark II comes out with video, and I started doing videos, and people are like, yo, dude, your videos are lit. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And people start paying you.
What kind of videos were you doing with that camera?
I was just doing like little fashion videos, like we'd go shoot like models and that type of stuff, and people would really, really love them. And so magazines would call you, like Arsenic and a whole bunch of other companies would like call you to do their, like, they'd have a photographer on, and then they'd call you to do their video for like that shoot, whatever.
And where were you posting these videos?
They would post them, the magazines would post
Oh,
them.
I mean like when you first shot them, like how are you distributing them? Like I'm assuming was this kind of like pre-Instagram, or like how did they know about them, about your videos?
So I guess like the magazines would so I guess the magazines would post, and then like other people would see what the, like, for instance, if Arsenic posts one, FHM would see that Arsenic did it, and they're like, oh dude, who, and then you have the credits on there, and then you get an FHM call or whatever that is, and you start doing the work that way. Like it was more like, and this is like, right, Instagram had started, but it wasn't like a thing where people were just taking pictures of their dogs and cats. Like it was not,
Yeah.
it wasn't really yet a advertising platform per se just yet, I don't think. Um, and so yeah, that kind of like snowballed into more stuff, and then Mike and I started doing like videos for artists and stuff, because he'd always been in the world of doing videos for artists. I was, and then I'd join him in doing videos with models and stuff. And like, so we do videos for like artists like OT Genesis, who's a local out here in LA, and a bunch of other artists in the underground world at that time. And people were like, yo, these are dope. And they like started liking them, started making actually a decent amount of money doing it. And around 2012, we were driving together in the car, Mike and I. And I was like, yo, dude, if I quit my job and just did this full time, like, how would that look? Like, you think would survive? Would you get me? And he's like, and I think it made him really nervous, because it was like, oh shit.
That's a lot of responsibility, yeah.
A lot of responsibility. And the funniest thing is, so like a lot of stuff that would happen is like, because in the nursing industry you make decent bread. So like at that point, I think I had a Scarlet and two Epics, red Epics.
Oh wow. How much were those back in the day?
Scarlet was like maybe 14 grand, I think it was, and then red, I think they came out, the brains and stuff came out to like low 30s ish.
So you had three of them.
I had three. By that point, I had three cameras.
Oh wow, why the reason for three?
So I did a feature in 2012, which is still yet to be released. It's called The Prey, and I had brought one Epic and a Scarlet to the feature, so A and B cam. And so we're filming. It's going pretty good, and then one of the directors was like, "Hey, you think we might need another camera?" And me at that point in time, I'm like, yeah, sure. And I just go out and buy the third one, which was a big investment. But at the time, it actually ended up being not the best decision, because I ended up losing quite a bit of money chasing cameras. So I stopped chasing cameras at that point. Like
just buying, like chasing cameras, meaning like the newest and greatest. Like you're always kind of, yeah.
I stopped. And about that time, I think was the end of life of the Red Epic MX. and I just bought the last one. And then Red's the worst, and well, not the worst. They're great. They're just like Apple, where like they'll release stuff very, very frequently, you know.
Yeah.
And so by the time I bought that, they released, I think it was the Dragon that came out after that. And like no one started after that point, no one's asking for the MX sensor, no one's asking for the Epics, everyone wants the Dragon. So you can't really rent it out anymore and make your money back that way.
Did you find that clients cared about that kind of stuff? About like the latest and greatest Reds, cameras? Did they hire you for that reason?
So my clients at that point in time were mostly like in the world of like music video, right? So and people did care about what it was shot on. Now in my currently people don't care because I mean, of course there's a standard, but like I could tell a client, hey, I want to shoot this on an iPhone, which actually funny enough, I've said that. Wow. And they're like, sure. Other times they'd be like, oh, I want to shoot on an Airy, or I want to shoot on a Red, or like you just let the job dictate what you want to shoot on, not the other way around. But back then, you know, people, and I think still people have that thought. They don't look at it as like a tool. They look at it as like an accessory, right? It's like having Nikes on or like something. Oh, that's a cool thing to have. But it's no one's like, I'm going hiking, I'm gonna put on my Jordans, you know?
Right.
Or like I'm gonna be working in the wet, I'm gonna put on like, you know, Yeezys. No, dude, you put on some waterproof shoes and you work in the wet and you're comfortable, your feet don't sweat. Like you know, it's but people still have that, oh, you know, tool. The tool is what is important and it's not necessarily that. But yeah, so at that point, he told me, going back to how I locked in like filmmaking. He's like, yeah, I got you. And so I was like, all right. So things got thick. I was like, I went to, like I did get kind of rocky in terms of financials. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna sell the two of the cameras and keep one. But at that point, they didn't have any value left. So that's why I say chasing cameras is a bad decision.
Yeah. How much value do you think they lost? They were like 14K in the beginning. What could you get for them back then?
I probably sold them for like combined maybe like 24.
Oh wow.
Like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was like 14 and then 30, and then I sold two of them for 30 for the Scarlet and the one of the Epics. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Anyway, like, but but the good part is it got my foot in the door. So either like I was still working and stuff, and I just grind and stuff. So that was, it was a learning experience. Like, don't chase the latest and greatest, but at the same time, silver lining, because everything has a silver lining. Is like, because you had the tool, people would be like, oh, he has that, call him. So I'm not going to tell people like, hey, don't. But if you do, just have a good business plan to where like you're not just only thinking about the tool. You don't have a plan to realize how the tool can work for you, and you make your money back, and it becomes like good for you versus not so much. And then since then, I just kept on grinding and working.
And what kind of, on that business plan note, what do you think, like what advice would you give to someone who wasn't your same shoes and is thinking like, I need to upgrade my camera to get seriously considered for jobs, but also how do I not just jump the gun and get a camera, but then be left like, oh, well, I just thought people would call me.
Yeah. Well, if you have the clients, so a big thing is like, getting your clients or getting noticed by clients, right? So, the work speaks for itself more than the tool, right? And then when you get the tool, the clients get excited, right? So it's like, so I think it's more cultivate relationships with, if you're a cinematographer, cultivate relationships with directors, cultivate relationships with producers. And at that point, they'll call you for the relationship. You're like, all right, cool. Yeah, that guy he shoots pretty well. This is his work. And they'll recommend you to people they know in their circle. Who are not necessarily in your circle. And, you can grow from there. But at the same time, let them know when you get new tools. Like, oh yeah, dude, I just got this. And sometimes you might not even be doing the job. They're like, hey, yeah, do you have this? Can I just get this from you? And you're like, yeah, sure. And so there's avenues on both ends of that spectrum. that can kind of help. But just walking into it as, oh, I just want the latest and greatest for the sake of having the latest and greatest is not necessarily like the best way to go.
Yeah. And I also have a question about your first big break. Like I know we see this progression, and it feels, you know, like one step after another. Was there a moment in your career that was like this was a huge job and it was like a leap, or was it always more kind of like progressing more slowly, or kind of in measured steps?
It's been very gradual for me, but there's some stuff that's been like leaps and bounds where it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on right now? And one big one was it was maybe 2013. Mike got a call for a Chris Brown video.
Wow.
It was Tank and Chris Brown, yeah. And like before that, we were doing like, you know, mainly underground artists and stuff. And oh, and you know, there's yeah. So we're doing underground artists, and so he gets the call. He's like, "Hey, dude, yeah, we have this Chris Brown video, and it's Tank and Chris." Oh, so like this is how relationships help. So he had cultivated a relationship with an artist named Tank, and Tank had Chris Brown on his song, and
Ah.
so and then you know because now he's built that relationship. He's like, "Hey, yeah, Mike's my guy," and then you know you get that, and now you build another relationship with a different artist. Um, so we're doing this video, and dude, there's like 300 extras. We're in a club, and I'm just like, whoa! It's like huge, huge, huge. And I'd never really been on that side of things. Like I'd never really on that scale. It was like an eye opening thing, and it came out pretty good. And you know, it was you know still younger in my career, but I was like, oh yeah, this is crazy. And then you know, slowly grew from there. And it wasn't just like so you do that and nothing keeps at that level. Like you do that, and then like you go back to the normal stuff you're doing, but then people see that, and then you get another call for something else that's different. Um, and then uh, a few years ago, I met a director here in LA. He had come to do a job. His name is Marlon, and so in meeting him, he had a video that I needed to do. He had a video that he wanted to do is for an artist named Daddy Yankee, and it was just a dance. It was a dance video, super simple. A lot of dancers though, like the most dancers I've ever shot. I think there was like 60 dancers on screen.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy, and it was great. And the song is called Kolkama. Actually, writing currently right now, that song I think is almost at like 2 billion views.
Wow. That's awesome.
It's yeah, pretty awesome. So that was another one that kind of opened up doors. And after I did that video and it did well, you know, I built a great rapport with Marlon, and then that opened more for like bigger videos and stuff. Among other directors, like you know, I've worked with like Jesse Terrero. He opened the door for a lot of Latin world because I work a lot in the Latin world.
Yeah, I saw that in your portfolio.
So yeah,
Cool. And in terms of like, what do you think the difference of budgets was between the earlier videos you were doing and then like your kind of big breaks? Like, was it was that something that mattered to you, or is that something that where you realized more gains personally, or was just kind of like the experience and then the connections from that?
budgets budgets grow over time. They're gonna get better. They get better, or I mean, and also like okay, so when I came into the game was when like the 5D Mark II had just come up, right? And in the
Yeah.
video world. And so that did a couple things where it made it accessible. So before that was film. A lot of people were shooting on film, and Aries Alexa was out already too, but a lot of people were shooting on film or that. And then the 5D Mark II comes out, and there's a guy named Vincent Laforet who like did a video, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, this video is like the thing, end all be all." They shot this on a DSLR. Oh my goodness! And you know, it transformed the industry. So that did two things. Like budgets used to be like up there, and because now they're more accessible, budgets kind of dipped, right? Um,
Yeah.
and then, but then now, people are not necessarily focused on the tool anymore. They're focused on actually the story and stuff like that, video world, commercial, whatever it is. So the budgets they're coming back up again. So like for me, it felt like a wave, like a ride in a wave kind of thing. But so when of course I was jumping on when like the wave was like, you know, in the trough phase, and then now it's like pushing again. So yeah, but they help. Budgets help quite a bit. Don't get me. You get to play around a lot and do some really cool stuff. But at the same time, even with simple budgets, you can still, like, I've seen some stuff that I was like, what? That was done that way? It's insane. So yeah, I wouldn't let that be like a limiting factor. It just pushes you to be creative. So then when you do have the tools, you can even be further creative because like you're not you're not this you're not just stuck on like a behemoth of something, or like, oh yeah, I gotta move all these things to get a shot done. You can still do something simple and nice and clean, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I want to transition a little bit to talk about gear. So, so you mentioned, the 5D Mark II, and you mentioned a couple of Reds. Now I saw like in 2015 you got the Arri Alexa Mini. Tell me about like the switch between from like Reds to Arri, because I feel like those are kind of like two worlds where people don't necessarily always move between them like that.
You know what? It's so funny. They're all tools, man. Like I love, so like in 20, I think it was 2017, I did a job in Spain that it when we got to Spain, we got there maybe 8 days before the shoot, and we wanted to shoot in this plaza that's right next to the Apple store, like the very famous plaza. And apparently in Spain, you have to get your permits 14 days, like 2 weeks before.
Ah.
Right. So we couldn't shoot the location how we wanted to shoot the location, like very intimate and stuff. And so we had to shoot plates. Well, their solution, so when I was coming into the job, I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna shoot this on Arri, right? But then like when we're like, oh man, we've got to shoot this location and this, that, and the other, but we don't have access to it. How do we do the shots? How do we make it work? And the production company as well as the label, they've already spent money traveling everybody from LA to Spain. So they've spent, maybe 20 or 15 flights, right?
Wow.
Hotels
Yeah.
for the people, right? So they spent the money to get the people there. So it's like you just don't, and they're like, man, we're in a bad spot here. How do we solve this? And so the suggestion comes up where it's like, all right, cool, like guys, we're gonna shoot plates and then shoot the artist on a stage, because they'll let you put like a tripod down and get your plate, So we ended up doing we shot the plates of the location and the angles that we wanted. And there was a lot of math involved for that and like sizing and stuff. But then the reason, so I ended up using an 8K Red because so we shot the artist in a parking lot on green screen. And then we shot the plates themselves bare. Now, what we ended up doing was getting the measurements of the stages and putting those measurements with tape on the floor on the location that we were shooting the plates at. And so like, but if I shot that on Arri and then VFX needed to zoom in and put the points where they needed to put the points and all that kind of stuff, they have no details. They can't.
Yeah, not enough res.
Not enough resolution. So like the only solution to shoot was the Red. And it worked out great. Like people were like, yo, that's kind of insane. And then, I shoot on Arri quite a bit. I shoot on Sony now also.
Oh, really? Which one?
The Venice.
Okay. How do you like that?
I love it. It's great. It's a great tool. I like its dual ISO. It's pretty cool. So they're all just things that let you, like, the Venice will let you shoot things in very low light very comfortably, and and that works out pretty good as well. So it's like, they're all just tools that I use to like paint with, different brushes. The only gripe I had I had no gripe towards the camera. It was just more of my attitude to chasing gear. So that part is like the part that I'd advise people against. Like, don't go for the latest and greatest because it's the latest and greatest. Like, learn to use a tool for the tool. Like, you're not going to use, a spanner when you need a screwdriver. It's like they're all just tools, and some things do things better than others, and others not so much.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of like your usage of cameras, do you ever interact with like the footage yourself after the jobs, or is it mainly kind of like handing it off to the production team? I see like a lot of your videos are colored by Company 3, which is kind of like the holy grail. Do you ever like do you ever get like feedback from them, or like where are you most, where do you get to exercise the most personal kind of say and creativity on a job?
Oh, so they're very collaborative. So pretty much when once the edit is locked in, they set up a session where the director, myself, and the colorist have communication into how we want the visual to end up looking. And for the most part, they just nail it on the head. They're so good. They listen. And they also bring their art. The colorists are artists as well, man. Like they paint. They paint with the pixel. They're pixel painters, man.
Yeah.
Like, yo. So yeah, dude, it's a great process. You sit there. I'm actually it's a cool system that before we actually used to go into company 3 and color there. But now they open access to you can actually do stuff remotely, and not have to be physically there, but then you still have the process of communicating with your colorists and stuff.
That's cool. And on the remote process, something I've been really interested in and trying to figure out is like calibration. So obviously at Company 3, they probably have like really calibrated and accurate monitors. How do you like review the footage on your end remotely and get kind of like the right color, like idea of like what the colors actually are? If you know what I mean?
So you can do. They have a process where they tell you what kind of screens you can use and how to set your screens up, and it ends up on it ends up being mostly like they'll tell you like, hey, be on an iPad or be you're on your MacBook, whatever it is, turn off your night mode and this, that, and the other, or all those automatic settings that change how the. What's that one that warms up the image? Is it night mode?
Yeah, it's night shift, I think.
Night shift, whatever that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, True Tone, maybe. Yeah.
Exactly. So turn that stuff off and just keep it at the default. And among a few other settings they'll give you, and you end up getting a really accurate picture, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on your iPad, your computer. For me, I actually have a calibrated monitor that's right in front of me. So I have the two behind me, these, and then I have
Yeah.
the one in front of me that I can just tap in and loop into the feed that they have.
Oh, awesome. Okay, now back to gear a little bit more. In terms of lenses, I'm very curious. Are you kind of like an anamorphic person? Are you spherical? What kind of lenses do you like? Do you own lenses or do you have the production rent them?
Mostly that's a deep question. I have some glass of myself, but it's like, more for personal projects. The I love an anamorphic, but I also love spherical. Like I wouldn't say like there's a a single lens I would go to. There's certain DPs though who love like a lens and they shoot everything on that lens, and everything they shoot is just wow, right? Absolutely phenomenal, and just like
Yeah.
whoa, that's insane, right? Um, but I kind of a lot of times actually those choices I have a lot of decent say in those choices, but a lot of the times I notice that certain directors like certain things because it's a very just because you're for me the way I look at it, just because I'm a DP doesn't mean that I make every camera related decision, right? So like some directors like seeing widescreen. Then you have two options. Like, all right, cool. I can shoot spherical and crop, or I can shoot anamorphic and not crop, right? So you have those two. Some people don't like seeing flares. Some don't like seeing flares. So it's like, some like a clean image, others like a vintage feeling image. So it's like, when you have the dialogue with your director and you start saying, hey, how do you intend for this to look? Because you want to get in their head and see like when they come up with a treatment or something for you, it's as a DP, it's your job to see how they see it. It's not just, all right, cool, this is how I'm going to shoot it. It's like, hey, so what do you feel like? How do you feel like this should look? Like, what are your visual references? Whether they're going to use paintings, whether they're going to use like visual work that's already set, and they're like, all right, cool, I want it to feel like this movie maybe, or I want it to feel like, you whatever that ends up being, whatever the tone of that is, then you make your decision from there. So owning lenses to be able to like do that even owning cameras though is honestly kind of it's catch 22. You can and can't, but it's like there's so many options to achieve different looks, so it gets kind of expensive to own everything. So rental is the way to go a lot of the time.
Yeah. And on that note, what do you think is more important to the actual end product itself, the camera or the lens set? Like if you were to shoot an Arri or Red or Sony, does that matter as much as the lens set does, in your opinion?
Man, they're all similar. They all create the flavor. It's like, you know, it's like In and Out, right? If you had In and Out without the if you had the patty without the lettuce, it tastes different. If you have if you had a cheese sandwich without, you know what I mean? Like, or if you had like no bun, it's a protein style, like it all has different each thing you changes how it looks. In order of importance, I mean, you're not going to shoot a camera without a lens. You're not going to shoot a lens without a camera. So they're both very important. But in terms of actually getting flavor from them, now that's when you start learning your tools and being like, oh yeah, this one would look good with this lenses, or this would look great with this camera. You know, yeah.
Does company 3, when they're like having the kind of pre-production color grading talks, do they ever hear you out and recommend a certain camera or lens set, like for the look that you want, like to make it easier for them to create it, or, you know, shooting raw versus ProRes? Do they ever kind of get into those specifics, or is it like you who are mainly making the choice of what camera to use based on what the director wants?
In my experience, they're very flexible. They haven't really told me anything of what to and what not to use. They prefer that you shoot it in, I mean, everyone prefers you shoot it in RAW, but I haven't given them anything. The only thing I've given them in RAW is the Sony footage.
How interesting.
Arri, I usually give ProRes to them. They're cool with ProRes, and I think they're also very collaborative. They don't say, hey, you have to do this way. Like, they find a way to work with what they have, and just the same thing as a DP. You find a way to work with what you have accessible to you. It's not a like one way highway kind of thing. Filmmaking is a very collaborative sport. It's like football, so you have to work with what you got.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of the actual on-set shooting experience, do you use preview LUTs, just the basic Rec. 709 conversion, or do you use LUTs like that you've worked with Company 3 on? I'm really curious, like how you monitor the footage to best visualize the end product.
So up until literally December this month, actually still though, even that. So I've always been a Rec. 709 person because like it's a base where I know what I'm getting when I see 709. I don't necessarily go the LUT route, but I wanted to do so. They started a feature and I wanted to use a LUT because, end of November, I was working with the DIT and I was like, it's funny. And he was like, hey, do you want me to do LUTs for you? And I'm like, yeah, I generally don't use them much. But you know, honestly, since you're here, might as well, right? So he was like, all right, cool. So I shot this. I think it was Cash Doll Claws is the name of the video, and it was in Atlanta. And so I shot. I'm like, yo, and everyone's like, yo, this looks great, and we're always monitoring on 709. And then towards like lunch, he's like, hey, come over to the monitor. And I come over and he's like, hey, this is a preview LUT I built. No, he's a LUT I built from the footage. And I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, what? This is insane. This is so crazy. And it looked phenomenal. So then that kind of tickled my fancy towards using LUTs a little bit. So there's a feature that I'm currently in that I wanted to do that for, but just the pre-production process did not allow enough time to get it done. So I'm still in the 709 world, but it's that experience that I had in Atlanta just kind of opened my eyes to another avenue, which could be interesting. But I still default to 709 because like I feel safe with 709. Like it's like, you know, if it looks good in 709, it doesn't matter what you do to it; it's going to look good anyway, right?
Right.
But if you throw a LUT on there and something doesn't work, then maybe you put yourself in a pickle. But that's how I look at it. I've never tried it. I've never like really like stuck on it. And there's people who do it and they kill it, right? So, you know, yeah, it's just my approach.
That makes a lot of sense though, because then you would know for sure if your exposure is correct, or if you have a LUT that's like super heavy, maybe it could be a little bit difficult to figure out how your exposure is sitting, just in case the client wants to push it a different way. Yeah, in the production. Yeah. In terms of like set production, you mentioned the DIT kind of did that thing for you. In terms of like all the crew members on set, who do you think is the most underrated crew member, like on set for production?
Underrated?
Yeah, like who do you think really kind of like glues it together that maybe doesn't always get kind of like the limelight?
You know, production designers, man. Um, Production designers. I mean, in our department, they do a lot. They're there a lot of times before. And granted, there's also like electrics and grips, and they do a lot of heavy lifting and don't really get NPAs. But I just find that like a production designer would be on a job if you're doing a very crazy build job where, like, an example I'll use is it After Earth with Will Smith? Is that the one?
I don't know.
I think it's After Earth. With his son, it's Jaden and Will Smith, and they're like in this whole world where like they let me see one second.
Yeah, sure.
Yep, it's the one, After Earth. So in After Earth, um, they built this whole world, built a spaceship, built like a whole crazy thing, and like the PDs on the job I think way before the DPs actually hired, and the director and the production designer are talking about what this world's going to look like, what the world's going to feel like, and and I don't think they get enough credit, because and then they have to build the world. Like even look at Dune. Like if you look at Dune,
Yeah.
you see the sets on Dune, like you know it's insane. Like the sets are phenomenal. The cinematography is also phenomenal, but like a lot of people will talk about the cinematography, but I never hear somebody say, hey, yo, those sets were phenomenal, and it'd be nice to hear production designers credited a lot. Also grips and electricians, um, they also don't get a lot of limelight, because they do some crazy stuff. They put cameras in places like you never think a camera could go. They move cameras in ways. The grips, I mean, would like put cameras in platforms, and you're like, "Yo, dude, I want a camera there," or "I want to light." I was in Mexico, and there's a church, and it had these really big windows, really big, and the church was up a mountain with a very narrow road, and usually we use like a condor to get our lights that high, and it's like a boom lift, and it'll pick up your light, and you put your light up wherever you want it.
Oh,
But the road
cool.
was so narrow we couldn't get the condor there to get the lights up. And the gaffer that I was working with, I was like, hey dude, I'd love to get some light through those windows. And the guy's like, oh yeah, sure, no worries, don't worry about it. We'll get it up there. And I'm sitting there like, okay, you know, dude, the guys like in 1 hour, and there was like four of the windows. In 1 hour, they put up scaffolding that you used to build up buildings, right? And like
Wow.
they put up scaffolding all the way to the top of the building, and they just pulled up this 18K, which is like it's like almost 100-pound light. They pulled it up the scaffolding, put it on a stand, and shone it through the window, and did that 4 times in an hour. And I was just sitting there like,
That's wild.
wild, absolutely wild, And people don't see that. They'll give like, yo, that DP is dope. I'm like, yo, I had no solution to get that light up there. My solution was not going to happen, But then that gaffer came in and it was like, hey, yeah, no, don't worry about it, dude. I got you. I was shooting a TV show in Kenya, and I wanted to move camera through a car and like be able to go through the seats and pan around, and I'd run into the problem when like the seats are kind of close. Every time I'd want to pan towards the talent, the camera's too long and it would hit the passenger seat. And I'm like, yo, dude, I'm trying to get this shot, and I'm talking to my key grip. I'm like, yo, I want to get this shot, but I'm like, I don't know how to get it because like I can't move the camera through how I want to move it. And he goes, come back in 30 minutes. I'm like, sure. And I come back like on the 25th minute. He's like, I'm not ready. Come back later. All right. And he's like, come back in 10. I come back 10 minutes later. He's like, hey, tell me if you like it. dude, the front seat's out. The front seat was out of the car, and like, and I could freely move the camera how I want to move it. Go from like the driver to the passenger to the other passenger to the people. And it was a van. Go to the back seat, and I'm just like, yo. And by the way, this is in Africa. This is in Kenya. Like these, and there's so much talent everywhere, and they just don't get enough credit.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of engineering know-how is needed for those kind of jobs, which you wouldn't really think, of that, but definitely helps. And you mentioned Dune, which is interesting, and I want to hear your take on VFX versus like kind of in-camera effects. I know that you've kind of used like green screen in your day as well, and I feel like there's a lot of polarizing opinions about it, and I'd love to hear your take on, VFX versus in-camera. Do you feel like some people say it's cheating, some people say no, it just increases the creativity? What do you think?
VFX opens up a world that a lot of times you would never be able to achieve in camera. Um, like, I wouldn't even use Dune. I'd just say Gravity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, now there's somebody's going to go shoot, and I think Tom Cruise is going to go shoot in space. But
Oh, really?
I think I don't know if I heard that down the grapevine. I'm not sure, but I think there's something being shot in space. But if I wanted to shoot in space, that ain't happening, right?
Right.
So without VFX, Gravity doesn't happen. But at the same time, there's also something to be said about achieving things in camera, because there's like a certain organic nature to actually seeing the pixels hit the screen, hit the sensor. Like it's a different feeling. So if you're able to achieve what you can in camera, I push a lot for that, because it just feels different. But at the same time, though, like David Fincher uses VFX in one of the best ways for me in terms of a director, where it's just not felt. Like if you say David Fincher uses VFX, you'd be like, oh yeah, Social Network had a bunch of VFX. Really? Like I watch it, I'm like, I don't think so. But then you watch the breakdown, you're like, holy moly.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to watch a breakdown then, because I did not notice anything.
Yeah. So same thing.
Okay.
Social Network was like that. There's uh like even just the two twins rowing, like you'd think they were twins. They were not twins.
Oh, wait, were they played by the same actor? Was that what it was?
No, there were two different actors.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Very mind bending. He has a very subtle hand with his VFX where it's very imperceptible. It just feels real. So I think VFX are great when they put you Dune. It puts you in that world. Like that world doesn't exist here, and then it's a blend between in camera and VFX. But like, it puts you in a world where it's just. If you're reading a book, you'd have that world pictured in your head, and
Yeah.
it puts you there. And just using those two, they're two very good tools, and they work differently. But I don't think one's better than the other. I think sometimes you can overuse one. Like if you spend all your money on set building, and you don't spend any money on other aspects of your filmmaking, you kind of end up in a bad place. So if you use VFX to kind of like, and then not that VFX is cheap, actually sometimes it can be even more expensive. But like you use the balance of those two, and if you can find a nice balance where it's just like it's seamless and not felt, oh, you've won. Like I love them both. Like I do a lot of VFX work, and I do a lot of stage work and set builds and stuff, and I wouldn't pick one over the other at all.
That's cool. I like that. It's a very nuanced perspective. Very cool. Kind of inspires me to have more of an open mind, honestly, about it. And in terms of like also like feeling that authenticity, I saw that you shoot stills on like a Hasselblad film camera, and I'm wondering, have you ever shot projects like video projects on film? And if not, is that something that is like a goal for you? And what would you shoot with that?
I really, really do want to shoot. Okay, I shot film, but I've only shot 16 millimeter film. I shot it was a commercial for a guitar on 16 mil film. But I haven't shot anything bigger than 16. I really do want to shoot like 35. As I said earlier, I came in the world when like the 5D Mark II had just come in, and it's started like, if I'd come in a little earlier, maybe at a shot film, but until like so far, not yet. But now the stills, I shoot a lot of my stills on film. Um, and you know, it's a slower process. It's a more disciplined process. With a lot of the way with the nature of the industry today, there's very few people who are able to accomplish shooting on film for motion picture because of the discipline. At 24 frames per second, you only have 11 minutes for your magazine to run out, right? So like,
Wow, yeah.
if you change your frame rate, then like, you have to calculate your math for that. If it's like 40, you go to 48 frames per second, you've gone like 5.5 minutes, 60, you've changed. You have to have that in your mind. And then not only just that, it takes time for the film to speed up, and you're going to waste some when you cut, right? So like you have to be very vigilant when shooting on film, that I think today in our TikTok, Instagram world, we've lost, because like we're very, just turn on the camera and shoot. Oh, keep it recording for the next 30 minutes. Like,
yeah, just take after take after take after take to like perfect it. Yeah,
exactly. And not even just that. There's also like do you remember when cameras or DSLRs had like a runtime limit of like, I don't know if it was like 10 or 12 minutes, and then they'd cut and had to re-roll again or whatever it is.
Yeah, I've actually had recent cameras that did that. It was
And
pretty
people
annoying.
Like, oh, I hate it. Exactly. And people are like, oh, I hate this. I hate this. On film, that's a given. Like that's has to happen. So, like, you have to change the magazine. You have to reload the magazine. And the culture currently is like, it's hard for people to work within the limitations, right? So I think even myself included, I look at how I've shot recently, and I look at the project that I did on 16, and yeah, it worked well. It worked pretty good. But I just saw like, oh, how much footage I actually did not need to have shot, or how I could have approached it differently and not like just blown through like rolls and rolls of film. And then even in the post process, like if you make a mistake and you don't check the gate and there's hair just chilling like right there, like one piece of dog hair from your whatever it is, it's stuck on every single frame you shot after that.
Wow.
Yeah. So like you have to make sure like, you're changing a lens, you make sure like there's nothing on there. There's that discipline.
Like a hyper intentionality to everything.
Yep. And and you have to take the time. And then like, so today in this world, like things happen so quickly where you have like 15 setups or 10 setups to shoot in a day. And, and you have to cover those setups because, that's what the budget currently will allow you. You're trying to get the most you can in the time you have, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's just you're trying to get that. But by doing so, you've lost the ability to be quick with things, right? Like, not quick, but deliberate with things. Where, say for instance, like on a digital camera, if there's a hair on the sensor, I see it immediately. Like it'll be on this. What's that on the screen? Is that that looks? Let's go check the camera, and you check it. On film, you're probably never going to notice that. Like it's because it's like you have your optical path, and it based on depth of field, whatever it is, you may not notice it. And then you have your sort of that aspect. Then you have all the things you have to shoot during the day, and you have different lighting setups, different set changes. And it's not, back when they're shooting film, they'll be like, oh, cool, we're going to shoot maybe 4 or 5 setups today, right? Today we're shooting 10, 11 setups, because we have the ability to. We have digital just allows you to move a lot faster because everything is so instant, so immediate. Like from my Hasselblad, if I shoot a still, I'm not going to see that still till maybe a week from now. Right. So like I shot it a week ago, and I kind of know what it looked like in my head when I pressed the shutter, but I'm not going to see it till like next week, and same thing for film. But in digital, I'm like, I could take my iPhone, I could shoot a photo. I'm like, oh, cool, that's what it looks like. Oh, matter of fact, I don't like what the sky is looking like. Hop on a program, like, let me change the tones here and da. Oh, great. but on film, all right, I have to scan it into digital and then work on it after that. Or, if I'm printing it, then I'm printing it with chemicals onto paper. Then I have to work on my chemicals to be able to be like, all right, cool, this is how it's going to look. And that's an even longer process. So I think the patience to be able to be like, oh, cool, I shot a photo today. I'm not going to see it till next Monday. And then when I do get it back, or if I'm the one working on it, I'll see it maybe tomorrow, but then I have to actually physically like manipulate whatever chemicals I'm with to process the photo to negative. And then from negative, like if I actually want to see not the negative, but see the actual photo, then it goes, okay, cool. Am I going to go print on paper or am I going to scan it to digital and then work on it? And that was taking you like a day. And if I had to tell people like, yo, you're a photographer today, you shot for X magazine today, and you tell a client, yeah, I only shoot on film. They look at you like, yo, we want to see the photos this moment we are shooting those photos.
Right.
So the patience is something that's been lost in the film culture, in the filmmaking culture, also in photography as well. But it's a beautiful thing for all the people who are still doing it, like Quentin, and people who are doing it on IMAX. So that stuff is just even IMAX. Like I can't even, because that's what I shoot. The negatives that I shoot are IMAX size, and dude, that's a whole other process. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's cool. And when you do shoot on 35 millimeter for your debut into the big boy film world, is that going to be a music video, do you think, or would it be like a film you work on, or a short project, like a personal project? What do you think?
It's most likely going to be a personal project first. And then from there, we'll probably stem from music videos. I don't like just walk. So a music video you have a client, you have a budget, you have to achieve. And unless the director you're working with or the production company you're working with is in my world, because I'm not, I don't pretend to know everything. So I like learning about things before I actually get into it 100%. So if I'm going to do it on a commercial project, which would be either a music video, a film, or something along the like that somebody else is putting the money in for, I would potentially need the time beforehand to be able to customize myself to the process of that. And I wouldn't do that on a commercial project just yet, but on a personal project, it's me spending my own money, and I can figure it out as I go. So my first film project would most likely be a personal one, and then from the personal one, it would transcend into like, okay, cool, music video, feature, or whatever it is after that.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. And then when you look back at your old music videos, your old work, like what is that process like for you? What do you think like the most healthy way to look back at an old project and and see like what's good about it, or what you can improve? Like, do you ever go back through your archives and kind of reminisce?
Yeah, it's mostly like I look back on the journey. It becomes a thing where you kind of see where you've been, and then because now you know where you've been, you know either what to do or what not to do to get you to where you want to go. So it's like, I think, history is the best teacher. So it's like, all right, cool. This is the process I had doing that. I loved how this worked out. I didn't like how that worked out. And then you're like, all right, you just start navigating your way through. Yeah. And looking back definitely helps, man. It's one of the better things to do.
That's cool. And in terms of you personally, what are your long-term career goals? Like, where do you want to be, in a certain amount of years?
I want to tell stories that move people. And most people get to do that. You need more long form work. I don't do a lot of long form. That's improving now as I go. But in an ideal world, it would be like my filmmaking career would look like a balanced meal, right? Where you have like your beverage is music videos, right? So you'll sip on your beverage the whole time as you're like enjoying your meal, right? Then your main course or appetizer would be like a commercial, right? So you do commercials. You're done with your commercials. You do part of your year, you just do some commercials. And then your main course would be like a feature film, and so you do features for most part of whenever however your career is progressing, and then your dessert would be like TV or something like that. So like throughout the whole thing, you just spread out different tastes and different varieties of something, and that way you're kind of fulfilled. You're not just stuck or pigeonholed in one thing. And you learn. You also, by going through those processes and working with a bunch of different teams and a bunch of different people, you get to experience other ways of doing things, and then you grow. So yeah.
That's cool. And for you, like immediately, like kind of what is the next step towards that, like longer term vision for yourself?
Right now it's currently more feature film related. So I'm currently doing a feature, potential for another one coming up. And then, nurturing those relationships and connections and keep that ball rolling while still maintaining the music video world one and the commercial world one. And then also, and actually also the TV stuff that I just done. Yeah. So it's potentially just pursuing more of what I don't have and entertaining more of what I do. So, still keeping alive my, music video career and commercial career. And as well as, now that I'm doing a few more features, letting that grow and also pursuing it more. And then, in addition to that, the film and TV world, also like nurturing new relationships in that world too, and seeing where that goes. No one can judge, no one can tell where the future is going, but just having that plan is definitely helpful.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us. Really appreciate hearing your insights in the industry, and your whole journey is really inspiring to others, I hope. And is there anything you want to leave the @camera.brains community with?
If for those who are in the game, I think most people already know the hardest thing in it is just to keep doing it. So, let the failures be your best teacher. Don't be discouraged by them. Embrace every single success, embrace every failure, embrace everything in between. But the one thing is just don't get discouraged. Like if you really want to do this, just, on the hardest of days, find a way to make it happen. On the easiest of days, it will make itself happen, but on those hard days, just be like, this is what I want to do, and keep doing it. And from there, I think everything works itself out.
Awesome. And where can the people find you on Instagram or website? Where do you want to drive the traffic to?
Cool. Yeah. You can check out, my Instagram is I am Kimata. I am, then my last name, Kimata. And the same thing for my website. They're both iamkimata.com. So yeah, just even check out any of my recent work, go there, which I need a lot of updating actually this year. I need to update a bunch of stuff, but yeah.
Cool. And let's chat about some more features of your work now that that was our first thing we shared. We shared a couple in between, and look forward to featuring more of your stuff in the future.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for talking, and have a good rest of your day. Appreciate it.
You too, man. Thank you.
Peace.
Bye, guys.